All righty, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar session. Before we get started, we'll allow a few moments for others to join us. In the meantime, please feel free to make yourself comfortable by grabbing yourself something to drink or grabbing a snack, and we'll get started shortly. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Hi, Billy. Welcome to today's session. We're glad to have you. Come on in, come on in. We'll get started momentarily. All righty. Well, let's go ahead and get started. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar session titled Plowing Forward, Harvesting Heritage and Leveraging Cultural Marketing Magic and Innovation. I am Patrice Lazard, Freedmen Heirs Foundation Project Manager, and your host for today's session. I'm also joined by Freedmen Heirs founder and Executive Director, Seneca Edwards Heron. Now, before we get started with today's session, I have a few slides for us to review. So we just want to remind everyone that this webinar is being recorded for those participants that registered and aren't able to join us this afternoon. And for those who join us during today's session, but have to leave the session prematurely, the session will be posted on Freedmen Heirs Foundation website and to our YouTube channel. As a reminder, attendees' cameras are off and microphones are muted. We do want to ask that you please use the chat and Q&A functions as they are enabled. And if you have any questions for our webinar guest speaker, Dr. Womack, please ask those questions using the Q&A function. And we also ask that all questions, we also want to remind you that all questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. Now, for those of you who are new to our webinar sessions or may not know much about Freedmen Heirs Foundation, this slide shows a little bit about who we are. So Freedmen Heirs Foundation is a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting Black farmers in the United States by providing them with access to technical assistance, financial resources, and marketing opportunities. We encourage all of you to please visit www.freedmenheirs.org/newsletter to receive all Freedmen Heirs updates and our monthly digital magazine, The Minority Advocate. We also ask that you follow us on social media. We're on social media on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube. And we could easily be found by typing at Freedmen Heirs Foundation in the search bar. Now, before we begin today's webinar session, I have the pleasure of introducing our guest speaker, Dr. Veronica Womack. Dr. Veronica Womack serves as the inaugural Executive Director of the Rural Studies Institute at Georgia College and Professor of Political Science and Public Administration. She hails from the Alabama Black Belt region and currently works in the Georgia Black Belt. She received her BA of Communications, MPA, and PhD in Political Science from the University of Alabama. An advocate and researcher of the Southern Black Belt region, Dr. Womack's work highlights the rich history, foodways, socioeconomic and political culture, and traditions of rural people in the American South. She is a noted author, practitioner, and researcher of the region. She is the founder of the BlackFarmersNetwork.com, a website that highlights the legacy of African American farmers with the Black Belt region. She has been featured in various media outlets, including the New York Times, the Washington Post, NPR, GPB, The Nation, and Georgia Trend for her work in the region. Funders of her research include the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Robert W. Johnson Foundation, and the Southern Economic Advancement Project. So without further ado, please help me welcome our guest speaker for today's session, Dr. Veronica Womack.
Hi, how are you? Okay, let me pull up my screen, and I am ready for us to go.
All righty.
Okay.
And while Dr. Womack is getting her presentation ready for us, we do have a poll that we want to ask all participants to take a few moments to complete. And that poll should be popping up on your screen momentarily. And then we'll review these results at the end of the presentation.
Okay. So now you should be able to see it in presentation mode.
Yes.
Perfect. Perfect. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so excited to be with you this afternoon to talk a little bit about the Black Belt region and the farmers that live there and the importance of promoting ancestral foodways and culture. So initially, I'd like to start off by just talking a little bit about the Black Farmers Network, which is a website that provides a digital presence for African American farmers within the Black Belt region. Initially, it was a way to disseminate some research findings and really show the diversity of African American farmers within the region. But I hope that at some point we'll be able to not only highlight stories, but also offer opportunities for marketing and branding and e-commerce opportunities for our farmers as well. So initially, it was launched in 2018, and it started off as me wanting to highlight all of the wonderful things that I was finding while doing the research within the Black Belt. To tell the stories of people that often are not able to tell their own stories, and to highlight the distinctiveness of this region and why this is important. So today we will talk a little bit about the African American farmer, just a snapshot. The region, I'm always amazed when I go places that people really don't know anything about the Black Belt and the importance of the Black Belt today, as well as in the founding of this country, the significance of storytelling and how we may use this as a marketing strategy, the dangers of the single story as it relates to African American farmers and people within the region, definitions of what do we mean when we talk about cultural heritage farming or cultural heritage advertising and branding and marketing. And then just using this heritage to promote our businesses, our agribusinesses, and our communities in general. And finally, the P's of marketing, 4 P's. So when we think about Black agriculture and African Americans within the South, I was so excited a couple of years ago, the New York Times put these 2 pictures or this graphic looking at a comparison between the Black-run farms in 1920, which is on your left, and those that appeared in 2017. And so what you see, not only is there a huge difference in the number of people that are farming, But you also see the distinctiveness of the region in which most African American farmers and farms reside. So when you look at this map, you clearly see the Black Belt in 1920, as well as in 2017 and in our latest agricultural census, a region that extends from eastern Texas to the eastern shore of Virginia, often called the old, Confederate South, known historically for the rich soil that was used in agriculture to promote an agricultural economy, but also the Africans that were brought here who had all of this agricultural knowledge to move this economy forward. So a very distinct region. There are often many challenges within the region, and as a social scientist, I often hear those challenges as it relates to the people that live there, but also the farmers. So most of the Black farmers that live there have smaller farms, and they're not really able to participate in the institutional markets that may be available within the region. They also are living in communities where, for a very long period of time, did not have access to the best broadband service, if they had service at all, which would make it very difficult to do e-commerce. Then there's this need to assist people with technical expertise and marketing and branding strategies. We have co-ops, we have extension service in the region. There's continued need for investment in those areas, and then limited resources, limited capital, and then the identification of markets that they would be successful. So that's often the challenges that we hear about businesses in general within the Black Belt, and then Black farmers as well. But there is a need, the economic impact of operating within this region. There's a need for Black farmers to be able to participate in e-commerce and making sure that they are within communities that have access to e-commerce. The logistics that's necessary for that, the branding, the marketing, the decrease in the number of Black farmers. That picture that I showed earlier, where you had in 1920 so many more people in agriculture. Now, we all know that those were varying experiences, but now I think we have a wonderful opportunity to support the farmers that we do currently have. Some of those opportunities are their ability to participate in these new niche markets that are opening up, where there's a lot of farm to table operations locally. The exposure to customers that may not be local, because you can now sell some of your products online. The importance of telling the story of Black agrarianism and the history of African American foodways and Southern foodways, and how those Black farmers have always played a role in those things. How do we tap the agritourism market? People are looking for experiences at this point. How can we play a role in those opportunities, and then strengthen and grow the small businesses that we do have? So as I said earlier, when we think about the Black Belt region, this introduction of this distinctive region within our society, most of those counties in 1860 had 50% enslaved population. So we're looking at a region with a very distinct cultural history, social history, economic history. And those agrarian traditions that came out of that region resulted in African Americans being able to acquire a significant percentage of acres and control Black farms. So when we think about community and the role that African American farmers have played, they've always played a very important role in the culture, heritage, and history of Black people within the region. And they were often looked to as leaders. They were landed. They typically were, many of them were economically independent, and they were able to do a lot of important things for the African American community. And stories have always been powerful in any culture. We're Southern, and so Southern culture always has this interesting storytelling component to it, but it's also important to the broader American culture. And so sustaining the culture through storytelling and socialization is very, very important in Black agriculture as well. So our latest agricultural census shows about 40,000 Black producers at this time. And most of those folks are older, but you can't separate American agriculture from Black agriculture. That's impossible. It's important for Black farmers who are typically smaller businesses to be seen also as smaller businesses. By not just them and their community, but the broader public as well, so that opportunities are also afforded to them. And there, I don't think there's any better example of innovation than African American farmers within the Black Belt, but that story is often not told. And so I started to think about this as I was doing some of the research. And at the time that I initiated the research project, there was a lot of discussion about African American farmers and debt relief and the condition of African American farmers, but there was not a lot of diversity to those stories. And so what I saw was a single story that was being told about African American farmers. And the single story is just this idea or this concept of a narrative, a single narrative about a people, a culture, a thing, and there's not any other explanation. And so it becomes pretty much fact, whether it's fact or not. So that was something that I witnessed with the story of African American farmers. And so it made me think about Ms. Adichie, who has written extensively about her Nigerian culture and experience. And she talked about growing up and only being exposed to British and American books, and how when she started to write as a child, she would write with characters that had blue eyes, because that was the characters that she was reading in these stories. And so she talks about how you can easily be trapped into a single story, and that stories are very, very powerful. And it's important that the stories are accurate. And so as we today talk about cultural and heritage farming, I want you to think about, what are the stories that you know of in terms of African Americans, agriculture, and farming? And have you slipped into just one single story about this group? And how can we show and tell a diversity of stories? Because stories are used to build culture. That's how you transmit culture from one generation to the next. It's what we call a socialization agent, along with family, the media, church, and school. Storytelling plays a big role in transmitting information and culture. So when we think about culture are the traditions and customs of a particular people. It's the artwork that's being produced, the dance, the folklore, the ceremonies, the traditions, the holidays. And then heritage is something that we pass from one generation to the next, that we possess. Is kind of something that we see as a birthright. So this African American foodways and agrarian cultural tradition is the history of our relationship to food, the way that we farm, the farm production itself, how we prepare the food, and then how we consume it, how we use food in our various life. in our various experiences, in our various cultural ways. And then this whole notion of agrarian tradition is this cultural link that we have within the Black Belt to the history of food production, food preparation, the consumption, all of these things, and then passing this tradition down from one generation to the next. We often hear now discussions about, sustainable agriculture, regenerative ag practices, and there's a lot of discussion in terms of indigenous practices, which are very, very important. There's also an importance in the traditional knowledge that we have within our community as well. And so how are we telling those stories as part of the work that we do, or as farmers, or as farmer advocates? So we've had a very limited opportunity to really tell the traditions of African-American farmers, and the Black Farmers Network is a way that I try to do an ode to farmers, Black farmers. We have a very unique journey as African-American people in the Americas, and at the core of that has always been Black agrarianism, and a complex relationship with the land, with the soil, with the practices. And so there's a need for us to find ways to be able to highlight this extraordinary journey that we've been on, but also that our ancestors were on. And so how do we take this moment in history to tell this astonishing story, and to also link it to these businesses, these agribusinesses that we have, that we may inherit in the future? This is very, very important work. So this idea of cultural and heritage marketing is a way for us to provide opportunities to highlight this rich agrarian tradition of Black farmers and the Black farms within the Black Belt region. This way of highlighting and marketing our culture and our heritage is a way for others who may not be as familiar to be able to peek behind the scenes. I love this particular picture because this is someone who is doing some really good ribs here. And so if you have a rib business, oftentimes people like the experience of seeing how you come up with these traditional foodways. And so there's ways that we can brand these things and drive business, but also drive knowledge, which is very, very important. So when you think about African-American culture and our traditions, how we produce the food, how we consume it, all of this and the preparation of it's an extraordinary piece of our history and our culture. So when we think about African-American farmers and our food traditions, they are very much connected. So let's think about the holidays that we typically, play a role. And the traditions, they're always at the center of that: agriculture, the seasons of planting, the harvest time. I remember growing up in Alabama in the Black Belt, and this is the time that we started to go into revival season. And so all of that harvest was a part of Church on the Grounds. And so that's some of the pictures that I'm showing you here, is that relationship that we have with that farmer and what the farmer is producing, and then how we prepare it, and then how it becomes part of our tradition and our culture. The church anniversaries, the emancipation celebrations, the festivals. So how can we use these opportunities to highlight the products that are being produced on our farms and connect that with the culture, the traditions that we have that are so rich? So I'll use another region, for example. Typically, when you talk to social scientists, when they talk about regions and areas that need improvement, they often look to the Black Belt and look to Appalachia. But one of the things that Appalachia has done well is to take that cultural heritage of that region and market and brand their products based on their cultural heritage, tradition, or regional branding. So here, I'll just give you a couple of examples of the Appalachian region and producers within that area, branding and marketing the products based on the region in which it was produced. So whether it's whiskey or some form of sauce or basket weaving in Appalachia is a big cultural tradition. And so you have, farmers and small businesses that brand their products based on their region, the cultural heritage, the norms of that, the traditions of those places. And so these are just some of some examples of people using their region and culture to market and brand the products that they use, the distinctiveness of those products, the traditional knowledge that was used to produce those things. So we need to make sure that as we market our farms, that we share the story of the farm, the products that are produced, the skills that were used, the uniqueness of that experience as part of our cultural marketing and branding. So how are they connected? Our cultural heritage marketing invites people to explore the Black Belt, to explore our food traditions. And, it's important to explain why your product is so valuable. Why is it unique? If what's the difference between me going into the store and getting some jelly from Kroger versus the jelly that you're producing on your farm? Well, your jelly may have a family recipe that dates many, many generations before you. So that adds value, that adds distinction, that highlights why your price may be a little bit different than the generic jelly that they're going to find in the store. So it's important for the storytelling about the place, about the production, about the history behind what you're trying to produce. That's important. So what is your unique story or the story of your farm? Our farmers and producers have tremendous, knowledge about agriculture, about the production, how their grandparents used to do it, and the food preparation. So we also typically have farms. Many of these farms are several generations old. Yes, we have new farmers, and I'm very excited about that. But within the Black Belt, we also have farms that have been around a long time. In Georgia, they call them centennial farms. And so if you have a centennial farm, or if you have a farm that's 50 years old or 50 plus years old, that should be part of your story. When you're making your products, or if you decided to have some experience or event on your farm, then the history of that farm is important. Many of these farms served as bases in the civil rights movement. If you're one of a few people who owned land within these communities and were economically independent and were able to host folks who may have participated in some of the movements, that's an important piece to share, to tell in your story. There may be some farms that birth juke joints. This is one of the stories from the New York Times with the farmer that had done that on their farm. I remember when I was coming from Greenville and stopped and talked to a farmer who was selling sugarcane on the side of the road, and I had a chance to talk with him, and he told me about that sugarcane was from an original stalk that his grandfather had gotten as his wedding present. And so those stories are very, very distinct. And, it's just amazing that you were able to keep that sugarcane that long. The white oak baskets that some of our ancestors used to make, and they may still make them. So it's important for you to think about the unique story of your farm or yourself. You may not have a generational farm, but your story, your distinctive story. You may have started off as a school teacher and decided that you wanted to start farming and opened up your farm, or you may be producing something. Then that distinctive story adds value to your product. One example that I absolutely love comes from my neighboring county in Wilcox County. Many of you may have heard of the G's Bend farm, G's Bend quilters, but they have used their cultural heritage and the talent to transmit not only that tradition from one generation to the next, but there's been a lot of activity as of late in their community, the airing of the quilts festival, and just a lot of focus on the history of that Black Belt community. And so there's opportunities for us to not only engage in an individual storytelling of an individual farm or an individual product, but also could we collectively within the community come up with opportunities and ways to share the food production, the foodways, the culture of a particular area to benefit the businesses that are there. Another example that I really love out of Arkansas, and many of you may have heard of them, is the Delta Dirt Distillery. So they have a very unique marketing strategy where they talk about how they've revitalized the downtown area based on them opening up that distillery. They make different products out of sweet potatoes, but they also have video and marketing strategy where they tell the story of their family farm. So you not only get what's happening in the present, you have an opportunity to explore the history of their family and the agrarian tradition of their family, which adds a lot of distinctiveness to Delta Dirt, beyond them just being a distillery today and being, the only Black-owned farm to be doing that. But they also tell the story of the elders of their family utilizing that same land and growing some of the same products. And so that adds value to the experience that the customers are having. It also tells the story, the distinct history of that particular area, and it really highlights what they're trying to do there. So just to discuss a little bit those traditional P's of marketing, whether it's cultural marketing or cultural heritage marketing, it's your product, it's your price, it's your place, it's your promotion. So while exploring this idea of making sure that we connect our products, our farms with this distinctive agrarian tradition and cultural heritage that we have, we also want to make sure that our product has very high quality. The packaging is important. The customer service is critical. And, how are you branding it? How are you telling your story? How are you telling the story of your product to draw people to your unique experience? And then, what is your pricing? One of the things that I had a chance to hear from one of my friends. She was so excited because she wanted to support African-American farmers whenever she could. And so she had been traveling and she saw a farmer with his business was beside the road and he was selling all of this really beautiful produce. And so when she gathered up what she wanted to purchase, he only could take cash. And so she was not able to purchase from him. And so she was saying, we have to make sure that we are able to, follow through with the transaction in multiple ways if possible. So are there ways that we may be able to also support farmers on the ground so that those transactions can be easier? And then the place, the location, it has a story to tell as well, and the logistics of those locations. So I'm hoping at some point that we can utilize more virtual platforms for our products, so that we're not necessarily place bound with selling our regional products, that people are able to go online and also purchase them. But we have to make sure that if we do that, and when we do that, that the quality is there, the product is there, the pricing is what it needs to be, and then the promotion, how we advertise the products, how we promote, where are we going to do our marketing. All of those things need to be under consideration. So how do we actually do this? Well, we can think about many, many ways to use cultural heritage marketing to connect our region and connect our agrarian stories, just like the folks in Appalachia, or the folks in the Delta, or the folks, even though the Delta is technically part of the Black Belt. But there's all kinds of ways that we can do this, but we have to use various opportunities to keep our customers engaged. To keep them loyal. It may not be just going and doing, markets. There may be events that you may be able to host, where you actually show the skills, the production, the preparation that people may be interested in. So how can we create this product identity that's linked to the region in which your farm is located? What's distinctive about the products that are being produced there, and the traditions that may have been birthed on your farm that you may be able to tap into or create? Again, not all of us are sitting on centennial farms, but there may be other experiences that you want to share with your customers on your farm, and being able to create a product identity that is culturally authentic and relevant is important. So from my perspective, cultural heritage is a powerful strategic asset and opportunities for our farmers, and we have to utilize that. So one of the ways in which we can innovate is highlighting the historical heritage of the place, the product, some activity. There is the need to create a very strong narrative. What is the story associated with whatever you're producing? If you're producing, some type of product from the plums that grow on your farm, then what is there a story behind those plums, or can you share or make up your unique story associated, so that people have an experience as they think about your product? And it's important to market the opportunity so we can transition our farms from one generation to the next and have a succinct identity, product identity associated. And it always adds value to what you're producing. So what can we do to actually achieve this? Websites are very, very important. I do know that many of us live in communities where broadband is still sketchy, especially if you're talking about the rural South, but websites would enhance your story, your reputation, people's awareness that you are, you are a business and that you're around and you have certain products that you can share. The importance of social media for promoting your brand, your products, your farm, that's very, very important. And then explaining the unique experience that you're trying to share. Can they visit the farm? You know, a lot of people now are interested in picking the berries themselves, right? So how can you add cultural narrative, cultural storytelling to that experience so that, yeah, they can pick berries on your farm, sure, but what is the added narrative that makes your berries distinctive? So highlighting brand history is important. Visual representations of decades of tradition is often important. When I'm able to highlight the fact that this particular product or this particular farm has this history, this rich history associated, that this used to be, you know, a juke joint on this particular farm, or this farm housed, you know, SNCC workers that came through this particular area, or it's been known historically for the watermelons that's being produced here. People used to come from all around, and those watermelons were also used in traditions at the church or at a lodge or at the school. There's so many ways that you can show visual representation of the experiences that are associated with your product or your farm. And then it's important, as you try to build your customer base, to build that emotional connection to your people. Love a good story. They love to hear, how did you get X? So how did you learn how to make those white oak baskets? Well, my grandmother taught me, my grandfather taught me, whose grandparents taught them. Now there's an intrigue in that particular product because you're sharing, not only are you able to make this, but there's a history behind this particular product that's connected to a people, that's connected to a community, that's connected to a region. And so passing this cultural heritage is very, very important from one generation to the next. And social media is important. And many of our rural communities, particularly in the Black Belt, there's wonderful opportunities to support creatives, young people who maybe are looking for internships that can assist. I know we have a school system within the community that I currently reside that have worked very hard, to have agricultural experiences at the school, and having young people interested early, but also they have the skill set to be able to assist with your social media presence, and there may be opportunities for them to gain valuable experience at the same time. And so it's important for us to think about making sure that we also have the creatives, because the farmer, if she or they are farming, there's no way that they can do everything, but there's ways that there can be a relationship where the farmer is receiving the expertise of people within the community that need to build their portfolio. So it's a way of unifying Black Belt cultural heritage, connecting the place and the product to the customer and to their emotions, and to encourage this emotional and economic connection to the region. And so I share here on this screen this gentleman who has a bird watching business in Alabama, where people come and his farm is used for bird watching. But while they're there, they're able to hear and learn about the Alabama Black Belt and the ecosystem that's there. So there's many, many ways of thinking about using cultural heritage and traditions in driving people to your farm. So what will it do, and who will it attract? So there's a lot of customers, potential customers, who are looking for a deeper experience. They're looking for something distinctive, authentic, unique. They want to make a difference and support difference. And they want to hear stories of distinctive products, family history, special places, engaging people. They want an experience, but they want quality as well. So whether you're shipping your product to Maine and inserting your story in the packaging, they want to know the history behind this. That's a big piece of your marketing branding strategy. And then using stories to have this emotional connection that's culturally relevant is important. So not just telling your story verbally, that's important, but also what images are you using for your branding and marketing strategies? Are there celebrations that you can host or either tap into where you're able to share the stories in those settings? Are there, photos of your family that may be available for you to also use as a way to share the story of your product, your farm, or your, whatever you're trying to move. And then the niche market. Right now, I say after COVID, there was a lot of focus on local food systems. And so that gives us, I think, an opportunity and an opening to look at branding around local, family owned. Some people are interested in supporting veterans, so veteran owned, multiple generations of people within the military. Whatever your distinctive story is, being the very first in your community to do X, that may be a way to promote your distinctive story and connect it to, the region and to culture. So we do understand that there are challenges. Of course, your time resource. Most of our farmers, they don't farm full time. So there is this time resource, personnel resource, and knowledge resource that may serve as a barrier. But really thinking about a strategic way of telling the story and your product, it may seem like, oh, there's no way I'm going to be able to do that, but it's not impossible, because you can start, one voice can start telling that story in that narrative, and then figuring out ways to involve other people to help you share it. Whether you have, family members helping, or find a local intern that's on the phone all day, and you may be able to get them an hour or two to just help you with the social media. There's always a way to move something forward that you really want to do. And then making sure that at the core of it, that we're utilizing our cultural heritage. We have an extraordinary ability to adapt to change and to do more with less. Collective, we have a history of collective approach, particularly in farming. That needs to be part of the narrative and part of how we move this cultural heritage and marketing strategy for the region forward. So our history and our experience here is very, very rich and historical. And it's important that we sell multiple and tell multiple stories. We're a very diverse group of producers. We're not a monolith. And so the more stories we tell, the more exciting, what we're trying to do becomes. So I will stop there. I want to thank you for this opportunity. Thank you to the Freedmen Heirs Foundation for me being able to speak with you today. And then I will stop so that we can have questions.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Womack. Always so insightful and full of education. I know I always learn a lot when we're in company of each other. So thank you so much for joining us today. I think we have one question in the Q&A.
Okay.
From Mr. Billy Van Kuren. He asked,
okay,
how do I go about creating my story and linking that to heritage if I'm a first generation farmer?
Oh, that's amazing. So I would think about what drew you to farming? So it can be, when we think about cultural heritage farming, it can be the culture or the history of the farm itself, or it can be your personal story, right? So I don't know what made you go into farming, but that is a story in itself. So if I decide once I wrap up my academic career and I want to farm as my next life chapter, then my marketing and branding strategy would be growing up in the Black Belt, being surrounded by farms and farmers and all of this rich tradition, and me wanting to farm and emotionally connect to what I used to know as a child. So that would be my personal strategy, right? So you, as a first generation farmer, you have a distinct story as to why you decided to farm. And so your particular story could be your impetus for wanting to farm, and then the place that you are farming. What's the history of that community? What is traditionally produced there? Are you producing new products, or is this something that could be a continuation of the place in which you're farming at this moment? So for example, you could be a first time farmer in Southwest Georgia, but Southwest Georgia has a very extensive history of agriculture. So while you may not have the long family history of farming, you're farming in a community that does. So you're going to connect yourself with the place. So it could be you marketing and branding a product, the place, an experience. So if you have, I can remember back when I was little, the community would come together for hog killings at my grandfather's farm. So there may be someone who wants to do that currently, and there's a tradition there that they can speak to. Maybe not a tradition of family, but tradition of community. So that's what I'm trying to say. So your story is unique. Everybody's story is unique.
Wonderful. I have a question for you, Dr. Womack.
Sure.
How do you envision Black agrarian traditions and cultural marketing, and what opportunities do you see for advancement and expansion?
Oh my gosh, I see so many opportunities. My hope is that first, we spread the word that there is a distinctive history here. So I grew up in, I just said in Alabama. In Alabama, I love the fact that they acknowledge the region and the distinctiveness of the region. And as I said in the presentation, this region extends from Eastern Texas to Virginia, but not all people who live within the Black Belt know that they live there. So my hope is that we expand the knowledge and understanding that this is a distinct region, and that the people that live there have a distinctive cultural heritage that is connected to agrarianism. And see, that knowledge opens up opportunities to expand how we look at what we're producing and the opportunities, just like Appalachia. They're not necessarily saying that, hey, here's just, here's some barbecue sauce, here's some jelly. No, they're saying this product is a part of Appalachia, which has a very unique and distinct history. And you tasting this product It's you're having the opportunity to taste Appalachian history and traditional knowledge. And so I see us expanding that idea and concept in the Black Belt. Yeah, you can get a watermelon, but you can get a watermelon in Mississippi that is very, very sweet from this region that have produced this fruit for generations. And the history and knowledge and understanding of farming that comes with this product. And so that's what I see in terms of us expanding the opportunities. And I see e-commerce. Of course, you may not be able to sell all of your products online, but there are some products that we would be able to ship. When you think of some of our states, for instance, the state of Georgia has the Georgia grown products. So this state, they want people to know that, hey, that product, those cheese straws, those peanuts, that jam, that's Georgia grown. So that's a distinctive brand. And so I'm saying that, yes, be a part of that, but also think about that Georgia grown, particularly South Georgia, is also Black Belt grown. And so there's a distinctive cultural heritage there that needs to be expanded so that we are transmitting that agrarian tradition from one generation to the other, and we're expanding the single story of the Black farmer because it's a diverse story. Yes, within a region, but there's a multitude of examples within our region. And so we have to tell our own story.
Thank you so much. I don't know about y'all, but I got chills when she was talking about all that. So many great ideas, indeed a visionary. I think we have time for one more question from Tay G. He says, thank you, Dr. Womack. Wondering where you see potential for creating more networks among not only producers for supply chains, but also cultural media for producers to start to push these cultural narratives together across the nation.
Yes, I see opportunities for the creatives to help. So we have, in the Black Belt, we have all kinds of creatives. Whether you got photographers, you got the folks that drive the social media, you have folks who may do some flyers on the side, that's their thing. We need everybody to think about how can we put together a local strategy, maybe connecting within the state and then the region. We have many farmer groups that have expanded, and I'm so excited to see that. I'm now wanting to see the influencers to not just help drive, because you have to think about African Americans play a critical role in social media and influencing trends. And so I would like for our influencers to work with farmers, farm organizations to trend the culture, to trend our heritage, to trend the history of these places. It's very, very important that the stories are told and that they're told from the perspective of the producer, the farmer, the person that's making the quilts, that's making the whatever. It's important that it's documented. It's documented. I tell people this story all the time. When you're growing up, you still have an emotional connection to the land because you remember the grandparents that's associated with it or your parents. But as we continue down the generation, that becomes limited. And so if we haven't done a good job of sharing those stories, it's easier to not necessarily have an emotional attachment to that land, to our foodways, to the production and all of that. So we need influencing help. We need influencing coordination. It's important that, yes, our farms are businesses, and we need business plans. We need, advertising, but we also we're in an e-commerce. We need presence. We need influence. We need exposure. And so I think we can marry these things.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Womack. Patrice, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All righty. Thank you, Dr. Womack, for that presentation. And as you were speaking to that last question, I was just thinking, it sounds like it's time for, a lot of collaboration amongst different industries, whether that's ag industry, communications, marketing, graphic design, e-commerce. It's time for us to all get together and think about ways, strategies, like you said, to try to get these stories told.
Yeah, it's important. It's very, very important.
Yes,
and
ma'am.
as we said, our farmers most of them are part-time. They don't have time to do all of this. We need to support them.
Yes, indeed. Well, I do have the results of the poll that I want us to briefly go over. I know we're kind of running out of time, but thank you to everyone who participated in the poll. Let me know if you can see the results on your screen. All righty.
Okay.
All right. So for question 1, it says, how important is it to you that products represent your heritage or cultural background? So 73% of poll responses said that it's very important, which I can kind of resonate with that answer too. I love a good story whenever I go in and buy a product, regardless if it's like hair products or the food that I'm eating, right?
I was just about to say, think about how we know hair product and the history of the people that we're supporting. We need that over here too.
Absolutely.
Yes. All righty. Number 2 says, what factors are most important to you in a product that reflects your cultural heritage? So let's see, it says 20% of respondents said authentic cultural symbols or designs. 33% said ingredients or materials specific to my culture. 7% said brand representation and community involvement. And 40% said cultural storytelling or heritage. So what do you think about that answer, Dr. Womack? What do you think about those results?
I think they're very interesting to have. I think it's important for us, as we just said, telling stories about the products and about the producers for our hair. I think sometimes being authentic is important, because just, simply throwing some symbols up there, that it could be off-putting if you don't do a complete, telling of the story. Right. And then don't put the symbols there if the story is not true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. So for our last question, it says, how would you prefer to learn about heritage or culturally relevant products? So 7% of respondents said through social media, 27% said through email newsletters, 20% said in-store promotions, 47% said community events.
Yeah.
So it seems like, I guess, going to the events and by hearing it through word of mouth, I guess, is the most the way that most people, I guess, get information these days.
Yes. Yes. And we have a lot of cultural events. When you think about, places that you can promote your product and get plugged in as a supplier, but it has to be intentional.
Yes, ma'am. Well, all righty, Dr. Womack, we thank you so much for joining us on this afternoon and for giving us a wonderful presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Yes, yes. Now, for those of you who are still in the presentation, we do want to invite you to register for our next webinar called Wholesale Opportunities at Procurement Companies. And the special guest for that webinar is Lynn Gorsuch with Foodbuy. So if you're interested in participating in this webinar, please scan the QR code. And we look forward to seeing you there. And lastly, we just want to say thank you once again to Dr. Womack.
Thank you.
Everyone who joined us today on this webinar session. I do want to add that we have a post-webinar survey at the end of this session, so please take a few moments to provide us your feedback, and that will help us with future sessions. All righty, and that concludes the webinar presentation.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
Bye. Thank you.